teacher humiliated in a cruel prank, until one student, Evelyn Moore, parked her car in front of the school, staring at the old, worn-out building that would now be her workplace. The building's lights cut through the darkness of the night, and she knew she was about to step into a different world, where the challenges would be much greater than she had imagined. Evelyn was no longer the successful lawyer she used to be. Now, she was a novice teacher in charge of a night class of high school students who, for various reasons, couldn't attend school during the day. She got out of the car, adjusting the bag on her shoulder, and took a deep breath before walking toward the entrance. The sound of muffled conversations echoed through the hallways as some students, tired from a full day of work, dragged their feet toward the classrooms. Evelyn felt a knot in her stomach, but tried to maintain her composure. She knew these students carried heavy burdens, and that many of them had already given up on believing in their own futures. As she entered the building, she was greeted by Principal Andrews, a middle-aged woman with a tired but welcoming expression. "Evelyn, I'm glad you're here," said the principal, shaking her hand firmly. "You have a big challenge ahead of you. This night class is made up of students who face real hardships. Some work full-time, others have families to care for. They already come here feeling like they're at a disadvantage. I'm ready to help in any way I can," Evelyn replied, trying to sound confident. Mrs. Andrews nodded and led her down the hallways. "These students have been through a lot. They can be cynical, distrustful, and many have resigned themselves to the idea that opportunities are limited for them. But don't be discouraged. They need someone to believe in them, even when they don't believe in themselves." When they arrived at the classroom that would be hers, Evelyn felt the weight of responsibility grow. As she opened the door, she found a group of students of various ages, all exhausted and visibly uninterested. Some looked at her with curiosity, others with disdain, and many seemed to just want time to pass quickly so they could go home. "Good evening," Evelyn said firmly, trying to establish her presence. "I'm Ms. Moore, your new teacher. We're going to work together so that everyone can achieve their goals." The students stared at her, some crossing their arms, others casting skeptical glances. She knew earning their trust would be difficult, but she was determined to try. Evelyn began the class by introducing herself and explaining what she expected from them. However, the resistance was palpable. The students were used to seeing school as an obligation, something to be endured, not appreciated. Evelyn realized that to reach them, she would need to go beyond traditional teaching methods. When the class ended, Evelyn felt exhausted, as if she had run a marathon. As she packed her things, she watched the students slowly leave the room, returning to their difficult realities. Some still exchanged glances with her, but no one approached to talk. The fatigue and disillusionment were visible on their faces. As she left the school that night, Evelyn promised herself she wouldn't give up. She knew these students needed someone who saw them as more than just statistics or lost causes. They needed someone to believe in them, and Evelyn was determined to be that person. She knew it would be a long journey, but she was willing to face the challenges. It wasn't just a new career. It was a chance for rebirth, both for her and her students. Days passed, and Evelyn began to realize that her traditional teaching strategies were not having the desired effect. The night class, made up of tired and disillusioned students, seemed increasingly distant. Despite her best efforts, the students' disinterest continued to grow, and Evelyn began to question her ability to reach these young people. Then, during one particular week, something unexpected happened. The students who had previously seemed indifferent began to show a sudden interest in the classes. They asked questions, participated more, and Evelyn began to believe she was finally breaking down the barrier that kept them so distant. However, an unsettling feeling told her that something was wrong. Little did she know that this sudden interest was not genuine. The students were planning a prank on their new teacher. That Thursday, Evelyn was especially excited about the apparent progress. When she announced that she needed to fetch some materials from the teacher's lounge, she left the room, leaving the students alone for a few minutes. Enough time for Marcus, one of the more problematic students, to put his plan into action. He placed a bucket full of water precariously above the door, ready to fall on the teacher as soon as she entered the room. The other students, aware of the prank, could barely contain their laughter, eager to see what would happen. When Evelyn returned to the room, she opened the door with a smile, pleased to see her students finally engaged. But before she could fully step inside, the bucket tipped and the water poured down on her. The room erupted in loud laughter. Soaked, Evelyn stood still for a moment, processing what had just happened. Her clothes clung to her body, and her hair dripped water onto the floor. The students, whom she believed were finally beginning to trust her, were laughing uncontrollably. What should have been a moment of triumph had turned into a public humiliation. As the laughter echoed through the room, Evelyn felt a mix of frustration and anger growing inside her. She questioned whether any of this was worth it. I had a career as a lawyer, she thought, and now I'm here, subject to this kind of thing? Is it worth it? The thought of simply walking out the door and never coming back began to form in her mind. The students' laughter cut like knives, and for a moment, Evelyn considered giving up everything. But then something unexpected happened. Daniel, one of the quieter and more reserved students, suddenly stood up. He positioned himself in the middle of the room and, with a firm voice, said, "This isn't right." The laughter diminished as the students noticed Daniel's serious tone. He continued, looking at his classmates, "She's here to help us, and all you can do is make things harder? If we want to change our lives, we have to start by changing our attitudes." The silence that followed was heavy. The students exchanged glances, some embarrassed, others still trying to process what Daniel had said. Evelyn, still soaked, felt the power of Daniel's words and decided that this was the moment to turn humiliation into a lesson. "You can keep acting like nothing matters," Evelyn began, her voice now firm and charged with emotion, "or you can start fighting for what you really want in life. And if you want to, start thinking now. What do you want for your lives?" She took a step forward, dripping water on the floor, and looked directly at Marcus. "Marcus, what do you really want for your life? What career or profession do you dream of pursuing?" Marcus, still ashamed of what he had done, mumbled, I want to be an engineer. I want to build big things." Evelyn nodded, then turned to Vanessa. "And you, Vanessa? What's your dream?" Vanessa, hesitant, replied, "I want to be a doctor, to help people." Evelyn continued asking other students. Jamal, who always seemed disinterested, admitted he wanted to be a basketball player. Carla, a shy girl, said she dreamed of being a writer, and Kevin, who was always drawing in his notebook, revealed he wanted to be an architect. The atmosphere in the room began to change. Evelyn could see that behind the laughter and resistance were dreams and aspirations. The students had visions for the future, even if they were buried under layers of disillusionment. "All of you have dreams, careers you want to pursue," Evelyn continued, her voice now firmer. "But none of that will happen if you keep acting like nothing matters. The change starts here, starts now. It's not just about grammar and math. This is about your future. And I've been sitting in those chairs. I'm here to help, but you need to want it as much as I do. Together, we can do more than you imagine." The silence that followed was different, not one of embarrassment, but of reflection. The students, who previously only wanted to have fun at Evelyn's expense, now saw her as someone who genuinely cared, someone who was willing to face her own humiliations to help them. Evelyn knew that this moment was a turning point. Something had changed, and although there was still a long way to go, she felt she had finally broken through the students' resistance. The relationship between her and the night class was beginning to transform, marking the start of a new journey for everyone. After the water bucket incident, the silence in the room was almost palpable. Evelyn, still dripping, stared at her students with a look that mixed firmness and compassion. Before she could say anything, Marcus, the prank's mastermind, stepped forward, embarrassed. "I'm sorry, teacher," Marcus mumbled, avoiding Evelyn's eyes. "I shouldn't have done that. It was stupid." Evelyn took a deep breath, controlling the frustration still boiling in her chest. "Thank you, Marcus," she replied, her voice firm but without resentment. "Admitting the mistake is the first step, but I want all of you to understand that this classroom is not a place for mean-spirited pranks. It's a place where you can change your lives." At that moment, one of the students, Jamal, who had been silent until then, hesitantly raised his hand. "Teacher, I have trouble understanding these subjects," he began, his voice laden with sincerity. "It's just that I don't see how all this is going to help me in life. I spend the day working a job I hate, helping my mom with my younger siblings, and when I get here, I just want it to be over. I don't see how studying is going to get me out of this." Evelyn listened attentively, feeling a wave of empathy. Jamal was just one of many students facing immense challenges outside the classroom. He and the others needed to see the value in what they were learning, something that hadn't been clear to them until now. An idea began to form in Evelyn's mind. "Jamal, I understand what you're saying," she said, addressing the entire class. "I know that for many of you, these subjects seem distant from reality. But the truth is, what you're learning here can make a difference. I promise that, in addition to the subjects we need to cover for you to pass, I'll bring in everyday situations where these skills can be used. I'll show you how math, history, science, all of it, can have practical applications in your lives." The students began to pay more attention, their expressions shifting from skepticism to curiosity. Evelyn felt she was finally reaching something. "And I want you to write an essay for the next class," she continued. "I want you to write about what you want for your future, whether professionally, personally, or for the community. Think about your dreams, about what you really want to achieve." The assignment caught the students by surprise, but Evelyn could see that her words were beginning to resonate. This task wasn't just an academic exercise. It was an opportunity for them to reflect on their own desires and ambitions. When the class finally ended, the students left the room in silence, each immersed in their own thoughts. Evelyn began to pack up her things when she noticed that Daniel was still in the room. "Daniel," she called out with a grateful smile, "I want to thank you for standing up for me today. That was very brave of you." Daniel shrugged, a little embarrassed. "I just did what I thought was right. I don't like seeing people being humiliated, especially when they're trying to help." Evelyn approached, interested. "You seem like someone who cares a lot about others. Would you like to tell me a little about yourself?" Daniel hesitated, but eventually opened up. He explained that he lived with his grandmother after his mother passed away and his father abandoned them. Despite the hardships, he worked in a supermarket during the day and attended school at night, trying to balance his responsibilities with the need to study. As Daniel spoke, Evelyn felt a deep respect for him. Despite all the adversities, he still cared about the well-being of others. Daniel's story only reinforced Evelyn's decision to be an agent of change in these young people's lives. She knew the challenges were immense, but she also knew she could make a difference. When she finally said goodbye to Daniel and left the school that night, Evelyn drove home, reflecting on everything that had happened. She thought about the difficult lives of her students, the struggles they faced daily, and the responsibility she had taken on by entering that classroom. Determined, Evelyn promised herself that she would do everything possible and impossible to help these young people see the potential they had. She wanted to be more than just a teacher. She wanted to be a guide, an inspiration, and above all, someone they could trust. Evelyn sat at her desk, surrounded by her students' essays. She read each one carefully and, for the first time, was able to see beyond the personalities they displayed in the classroom. The written words revealed dreams, fears, and hopes they kept hidden like treasures locked away. Each student was now a complete individual in Evelyn's eyes, with a unique story and a desire to change their lives for the better. The following weeks brought notable changes to the classroom. Evelyn's unconventional approach, which integrated practical lessons from everyday life with traditional content, began to take effect. The students were more interested and engaged, studying harder and understanding the subjects in ways that had previously seemed impossible. Group discussions, which addressed not only academic difficulties but also personal struggles, transformed the class into something closer to a support group or even a family. The students began to help each other, developing bonds that extended beyond the classroom. Evelyn watched with satisfaction as those young people, who had previously been so disconnected, now found motivation and support in one another. The classroom became a place of growth and change, where each one could dream of a better future and actively work to achieve it. However, the hard-won tranquility was shaken by unexpected news. One day, at the end of a class, Evelyn was called to the principal's office by Mrs. Andrews. As she entered the office, Evelyn felt a weight in the air. Mrs. Andrews's expression was somber, and before Evelyn could ask what was happening, the principal began to speak. "Evelyn, we need to talk about something very serious," said Mrs. Andrews in a grave tone. "We received a notification from the Department of Education. The funding to maintain the night class is at risk." Evelyn frowned, confused and worried. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means that if the students don't significantly improve their grades on the upcoming exams, the funding will be cut, and the class will be closed," Mrs. Andrews replied, clearly distressed. "They believe the night class isn't meeting the necessary academic objectives to justify the investment." Evelyn felt a chill run down her spine. Everything her students had worked for, all the transformation that was happening, was now at risk. "But they're improving. They're starting to believe in themselves," Evelyn argued, trying to stay calm. "We can't just cut the program now. They need this." "I know, Evelyn," the principal replied sadly, "but this is a decision that came from above. It's not in our hands. The only thing we can do is ensure they perform exceptionally well on the upcoming exams. Otherwise, everything you've built here will be undone." Evelyn was silent for a moment, processing the gravity of the situation. The class was finally showing progress, but now they were facing a new obstacle, one that could destroy everything they had achieved. She knew that if the students lost this chance, many of them wouldn't have another opportunity. Their future was at stake, and Evelyn couldn't let it all fall apart now. The chapter ends with Evelyn leaving the principal's office, the weight of responsibility on her shoulders, determined to find a way to help her students overcome this challenge. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she also knew she wasn't alone in this fight. Evelyn returned to the classroom with her mind racing, knowing she needed to act quickly. That very night, after the class ended, she called an urgent meeting with the students. They entered the room in silence, sensing the gravity of the moment. Evelyn closed the door and stood at the front of the class, her face reflecting the seriousness of the situation. "We need to talk about something very important," she began, looking directly at the students. "I received some news today that could change everything we've been building here." The students exchanged worried glances. Jamal, always direct, was the first to speak. "What happened, teacher?" Evelyn took a deep breath before answering. "The school received a notification that if we don't significantly improve your grades on the upcoming exams, the funding for the night class will be cut. If that happens, this class will be closed, and you'll lose this opportunity to continue your education." A murmur of unease swept through the room. For many of these students, the night class was their only chance to finish high school and aspire to a better life. The thought of losing it all was devastating. "But we're improving," protested Vanessa, her voice full of emotion. "We're learning more now than we ever have before." This can't happen." "I know, Vanessa," Evelyn replied, trying to stay calm. "You're making a lot of progress, but unfortunately, that's not enough for those at the top. They want immediate results, and we need to show that we're capable." "So, what are we going to do?" Marcus asked, the concern evident in his voice. "How are we going to improve everyone's grades in such a short time?" Evelyn knew this would be the hardest part. The pressure was on all of them, and time was short. But she also knew this was the moment to come together even more as a group, to turn the pressure into motivation. "We're going to come up with a plan," Evelyn said firmly. "We need to focus on the subjects where you have the most difficulty and work together to improve. I'll be here to help with whatever you need, but you also need to help each other. We'll form study groups, review the material, and practice until everyone feels confident for the exams." Daniel, who had been silent until then, spoke with determination. "If we work together, we can do it. We can't let everything we've done so far be in vain." Daniel's words seemed to echo in the hearts of the other students. There was an exchange of glances, and the expression of concern began to give way to a silent determination. "We need to support each other," Evelyn continued. "This class has become more than just a classroom. It's become a family. And like any family, we face our problems together. If anyone is struggling, don't be afraid to ask for help. We're all in the same boat, and we'll get to the other side together." The students nodded, absorbing Evelyn's words. The challenge was great, but now they knew they weren't alone. The strength of the class was in the unity they had built, and Evelyn was determined not to let anything destroy that. "We'll start tomorrow," Evelyn said, already formulating a plan in her mind. "We'll divide the time between review and intensive practice. But above all, let's keep our focus on what we want to achieve. Don't forget the essays you wrote, the dreams you shared. This is the moment to fight for them." The students left the room that night with a mix of anxiety and determination. Time was against them, but Evelyn knew that with hard work and unity, there was a chance to save the class. When the last student left, Evelyn was alone in the room, the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. She knew the coming days would be intense, but she was willing to do whatever it took to ensure her students had a chance at success. They couldn't afford to lose this battle, and Evelyn was ready to fight to the end. With the exam deadline approaching, Evelyn's classroom became the center of a true race against time. The students, determined to save the night class, began organizing into small study groups outside school hours. They met at each other's homes, in libraries, and even in neighborhood cafes whenever they had a free moment. The idea was that together, they could review the material, discuss doubts, and help each other overcome difficulties. Evelyn, for her part, was more involved than ever. She knew that her students' future depended not only on their effort but also on the support she could provide. So, she began dedicating extra hours outside of class, making herself available to help struggling students, whether through individual tutoring or participating in the study groups they had formed. However, as the exam day approached, external pressures began affecting some students in unexpected ways. Jamal, who was already struggling to balance work and studies, began missing some study sessions, citing being overwhelmed with responsibilities at home and work. Vanessa, despite her academic progress, began to feel insecure, fearing that all her efforts would be in vain if she couldn't get the necessary grades. The anxiety was palpable, and Evelyn realized that keeping the group united and focused would be more difficult than she had imagined. She did her best to support each student, reminding them of what was at stake, but also understanding that the pressure could be overwhelming for young people who already had so much to worry about. In the midst of this tension, a particular incident threatened to destabilize everything. Marcus, who had shown determination since the water bucket incident, had a disagreement with Daniel during one of the study sessions. The words exchanged quickly escalated into something more serious, almost leading to a fight. Evelyn had to intervene, and the atmosphere became tense. with the students feeling the weight of the expectations on their shoulders. "I don't know if I can do this," admitted Carla during one of her meetings with Evelyn. "All of this is making me so nervous. What if I fail? What if we all fail?" Evelyn knew that Carla's words echoed the feelings of many other students. They had fought so hard, but now, with the exam date approaching, the fear of failure was taking over. "Carla, I know it's hard," Evelyn said, trying to calm her down. "But you're not alone in this. We'll get through this together, one step at a time. What's important is that you all dedicate yourselves and do your best. The rest, well, we'll deal with that when the time comes." The days became an emotional roller coaster. Some students began showing signs of exhaustion, others seemed ready to give up, but Evelyn was determined to keep them on track. The goal was clear: improve the grades, save the class, and above all, prove that everyone there had the potential to achieve something greater. Finally, the day of the exams arrived. The atmosphere in the room was tense. The students sat in their seats, each trying to hold their nerves as the exams were distributed. Evelyn looked at them, wishing she could offer more than just words of encouragement. She knew she had done everything she could, and now the rest depended on them. "You can do this," Evelyn said, trying to convey confidence through her gaze. "Remember everything we've learned together. Trust yourselves." The students began the exam, and the silence that settled in the room was heavy, full of concentration and effort. Evelyn watched from afar, feeling a mixture of hope and anxiety. This was the decisive moment, and all that was left was to hope that the hard work of the past months would pay off. The days following the exams were filled with pure anxiety. Evelyn and her students waited with frayed nerves for the results that would determine the future of the night class. When the results finally arrived, Evelyn gathered everyone in the classroom to share the grades. She began by highlighting the students who had done exceptionally well, praising the effort and dedication they had shown. Vanessa, who had feared the exam so much, exceeded expectations, and Daniel, with his quiet discipline, also performed exceptionally well. Others, like Jamal and Marcus, didn't do as well as they had hoped, but even so, the progress was evident. The students, though nervous, were impressed with how well many of them had done. For most, these were the best grades they had ever received. Evelyn felt immense pride for each of them, for all they had achieved so far. However, the moment of celebration was interrupted by devastating news. Despite all their efforts, they hadn't met the goal set by the Department of Education. The atmosphere in the room immediately changed. The feeling of euphoria was replaced by a heavy, uncomfortable silence. Despair gripped the room. Some students were distraught, worried about what this would mean for their future. Others, like Marcus, were furious, feeling that all their hard work had been in vain. "This isn't fair," he shouted, pounding the table in frustration. "We worked so hard, this can't end like this." Vanessa, still with tears in her eyes, turned to Evelyn. "Can't you do something, teacher? As a lawyer, isn't there something you can do?" Evelyn, who was also struggling against despair, took a deep breath. "I was thinking the same thing, Vanessa," she said with renewed determination. "I'm going to fight for this class, and I'm not giving up on you." In the following days, Evelyn worked tirelessly to prepare her case. She scheduled a meeting with the Department of Education's board, insisting that they meet at the school itself. When the day of the meeting arrived, the conference room was packed, with board members seated on one side, while Evelyn, accompanied by her students, was on the other. Evelyn began her presentation by introducing each of the students. She spoke passionately about the progress each one had made, highlighting the challenges they had faced and overcome along the way. She showed the essays they had written, filled with dreams and hopes, and explained the importance of the night class in these young people's lives. She continued by presenting the performance evaluations since she had taken over, showing how the results had been consistently improving. "These students are not just numbers on a spreadsheet," she said. looking directly into the eyes of the board members. They are people with stories, struggles, and dreams. They deserve a chance. However, each of Evelyn's pleas was denied by the board, which insisted that the goals hadn't been met and that therefore, the class should be closed. But Evelyn wasn't willing to give up. With determination, she presented a document she had prepared, a petition signed by students, parents, and community members, all demanding that the night class continue. Legally, you cannot shut down this class without considering the impact it has on the community, Evelyn argued. These signatures prove that this decision is not in the public interest, and I am prepared to take this further if necessary. The board was silent, surprised by the strength of Evelyn's arguments. After a brief discussion among themselves, the board president finally stood up and announced the decision. In light of the arguments presented, we have reconsidered our position. The night class will remain active, and we look forward to seeing even more progress in the future. Relief washed over the room. The students let out a collective sigh, some even shedding tears of emotion. Evelyn felt a wave of satisfaction and pride. She had achieved the impossible, ensuring that her students had the chance to continue their journey. One of the students, Daniel, stood up and, with a voice full of emotion, addressed the board and Evelyn. I know we still have a lot to improve, but thank you for not giving up on us. This class is not just a classroom. It's a family, and you've given us a new chance to believe in ourselves. Daniel's words touched everyone in the room. Evelyn felt her eyes fill with tears, but they were tears of happiness and fulfillment. These young people, who had started out so disillusioned, now had the chance to dream of a better future. And she knew that together, they would succeed. Months passed. The graduation of the night class was a simple event, but one filled with meaning. The school auditorium, lit by soft lights, was decorated with ribbons and balloons, as the families and friends of the graduates took their seats, eager to see their loved ones receive their diplomas. Evelyn, with a proud smile, watched the students who had become more than just students to her. They were the living proof that perseverance, hard work, and self-belief could transform lives. As the names were called one by one, the students walked up to the stage to receive their diplomas, each of them radiant with the achievement of a dream that had once seemed impossible. When all the diplomas had been handed out, Daniel, chosen by his classmates as the class representative, approached the microphone. He looked at the smiling faces of his peers before turning to Evelyn, who was sitting in the front row. Ms. Evelyn, he began, his voice filled with emotion, we all know that we wouldn't be here today without you. You taught us more than just school subjects. You taught us to believe in ourselves, to fight for our dreams, and above all, to never give up, even when things seem impossible. Evelyn's eyes began to well up as Daniel continued. This class is more than just a class. We've become a family, and you're the person who kept this family together. We want to thank you for everything you've done for us. And as a token of our appreciation, we have something special for you. With a gesture, Daniel signaled to the other students, who stood up and walked to the stage. Together, they held up a large frame that, when revealed, showed a collage of photos from the most important moments of the class's journey, from the first lessons to the study sessions and the day of the exams. In the center, a golden plaque was engraved with the words, "To the best teacher and mentor, thank you for guiding us and never giving up on us." Evelyn was called up to the stage, tears finally streaming down her face as she hugged each of the students. I couldn't be prouder of all of you, she said, her voice choked with emotion. Seeing what you've accomplished is the greatest gift I could receive. The auditorium erupted in applause as the graduates, their families, and community members came together to celebrate not just a graduation but a collective victory. That night, as the auditorium lights dimmed, Evelyn felt a deep peace. She had made a difference. And more than that, she had helped shape a new generation that would continue to fight for their dreams, no matter what obstacles arose. The night class, which had once almost been dismantled, had become an example of success, inspiring other educators and communities. And Evelyn, the teacher who never gave up, became a legend at the school, forever remembered for her dedication and love for her students. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave a comment, and check out our next story.